Good morning. Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Micah, doing great.
Awesome. I see you rocking the Hawaiian shirt again. Is this a new one or is this a repeat?
You know, it's a new one, and I keep surprising myself that I have more, and I think I have more to come. So I didn't set out in this world to become known as a Hawaiian shirt guy, but sometimes you just fall into your tropes, so it's okay.
You gotta find your path, man. I like to picture your closet as just row after row of a Hawaiian shirt, and just like every day, it's that's what you're doing. Good morning, everyone. How I'm doing out there? Gabby, greetings from Burbank. Oh, not too far from me, actually. Where is everyone watching from? Send us a greeting from wherever you are. I love to see the different cities and sometimes countries where people are watching from. I'm in sunny Los Angeles, and Rob, you're down in sunny San Diego. So representing the West Coast here on ButterDocs Live. We're going to have a pretty fun show, I think, today. Rob, what do we got in store?
Well, we have an published author, and her dev editor is going to come on and just talk about their process and their relationship. Very, very excited for that conversation and for me to learn a little bit about that process. So very excited. And one thing I wanted to also announce before we got started is we had previously mentioned doing the winners of the NaNoWriMo sweepstakes possibly today. We are going to be doing that on the 20th at our kind of meet the team event, our kind of holiday party. So add that to your calendars. December 20th, same time, Wednesday at 10 a.m. for now. We'll be announcing the winners. There's 19 winners. So again, if you don't remember, it was $1,200 Airbnb gift card, Apple AirPod Maxes, 3 of those, a bunch of $50 gift cards. We're going to be notifying the winners afterwards, but it's just a lot more fun if you're there, and you can accept the prize there. So come to that.
Am I eligible for any of those prizes? Out of curiosity, could I?
We're having to. I wish you didn't do this, but it's a lot of work, like filtering out all your entries, Micah. So
I could use a vacation. I kind of want to just like go into a cabin and do my own little writer's retreat. So I've been trying to sneak in some entries under some pseudonyms, but it hasn't been working.
We can just talk about that. We can find you some time off, Micah.
I'd love that. I mean, it's the holidays. Yeah, and then next week
that'll be coming up on the 20th, and then also next week is going to be a great show as well with Mark Gottlieb. He is a VP and literary agent at Trident Media Group, a top literary agency. So come next week for that conversation. We'll learn all the ins and outs on how to get a literary agent, how to go the traditional publishing route. He'll have a lot of words on that stuff. So exciting stuff. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it back over to Micah. I think we're going to get us going today with a little slice of ButterDocs.
That's right. Hit me with that intro graphic.
All right, hold on.
Awesome. All right. So welcome to Slice of ButterDocs. Now, we often think of writing as a solitary pursuit. Even if you don't co-write, though, you probably are still collaborating if you're getting feedback from beta readers, proofreaders, editors, agents, whomever. And ButterDocs makes it really easy to get input from collaborators while giving you control over which of their edits make it actually into your documents. It's kind of a best of both worlds where you can get their input, but you still get to choose, which ones you use. So here, I have this fake novel that I wrote called Great Success, Minimal Effort. It's about an accountant named Brad Brewster who just decides to try writing and just instantly becomes an overnight literary sensation, something that all of us dream about. And my favorite part of this fake novel is that he has a friend named Gustav who's like a real writer who's been struggling like for years to make it. And he just gets insanely jealous of Brad. But I digress. Anyways, so I have this document. and it's got some typos in it. I want to send it to a proofreader. So the way I can do that is I can just go up here and click new copy, and I can give it a description. Like I'm going to call it proofreader draft. And then I can share this draft with someone down here. So I'm going to choose Bill Shakespeare, famed proofreader. And I have here changes require your review. Is that set on yes? So that whatever Bill does, I can still, review those changes again and make sure that they're what I want. And there's also a welcome note here. There's kind of some pre-generated text, which you can also add to if you want to give more specific instructions to whomever you're sharing your draft with. And you can choose to start marking changes, which I'm going to do here. And then you just hit create. And now you'll see we have these two drafts. So this is the proofreader draft right here. And if we click on main draft, this is the main draft. And so the cool thing about this is all the changes to the proofreader draft won't affect the main draft until you decide to do that. So now I'm going to switch hats a little bit here. So this is, Micah, the writer. And if I go over to this window here, this is Bill Shakespeare. He's logging in. And if I refresh this here, let's see how my internet quality is doing right now, how long it takes me to refresh my browser. Oh, well, see this invite. Micah Craddy invited you to collaborate on a draft. So this is what your collaborator will see. And they hit accept. And they get that little note here. And again, you could have added to this if you wanted, close and show document. And now they'll see, I'm gonna make this a little bigger just to make it easier. Right. So this is the draft. So again, I'm the proofreader here, and I can go through this and I'm like, okay, it's just writing there. That should be marked there. Gustav's arms flailed about. I think I have something here about prompting Brad to shield his bear with the coaster. Oh no, that should be beer with the coaster. Right. And you'll notice this is blue because I'm marking the changes by writer, and Bill Shakespeare is blue. And so if he's writing more, it'll all be blue. And then, you can do all the changes you want, go through this whole book. And then once you're done with your pass, once your collaborator's done, so Bill's proofread everything. And this is the time where you'd have to text someone and be like, hey, it's ready. And, sometimes the other person, the original writer is like, are you done yet? Have you done your pass? But it's really easy with ButterDocs because you can actually just go up here and be like, boom, needs review. I'm done. And then Micah will get an email notification saying, hey, Bill's done. He did his draft. Now it's time for you to look at it. So then I come back here as Micah again. And the cool thing is I can click merge into draft. And what I'll see here is, I like doing side by side, is I'll see the main draft, the original draft, and then I'll see the proofreader draft. And you'll notice that all of the changes that Bill Shakespeare made are marked. And this is where I get to decide, do I want to take his changes? And you can accept all of them, or you can do one by one. So I'll be like, accept this. Yeah, that looks good. Oh yeah, made some mistakes here. Accept. And then you can merge these two into main. So basically this means I'm going to take these changes and put them into my main draft. Merge into main, confirm merge. And now in my main draft, you'll see these fixes here, like Gustav's and the beer have been incorporated into the main draft. So it's a way where you can get the feedback, the input from other people, no matter whom they are, and but still, keep control over your story, your novel. And that is today's tasty slice of ButterDocs. And without further ado, we are joined by our guests for today. I'm very excited to speak with them. We have Lara Buckheit, an author, and Jennia D'Lima. And did I say those correctly?
Yep.
Yes. First and last names before. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking today about the relationship between writers and development editors, writing coaches. We can kind of get into the differences, like what these terms mean. But I'm really excited. So Lara is an author, and Jennia is her Developmental editor.
Yep.
And we are going to get into this. So let's just start, with the writer, because I feel like that's where everything starts, with writing. So Lara, do you want to talk just a little bit about your background? How did you get into writing?
I feel like I have the kind of journey where you start writing when you're really young, but it's like nothing good. And I definitely started with fan fiction, mostly about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, and I
You
decided.
remember any of those stories? Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but just like what's Buffy up to in your fan fiction?
It was mostly just, the usual, her running around and, falling in love with Spike.
Nice.
Everything I write is a love story, so that had to happen. And usually just pissing off Angel. I remember doing that a lot.
Nice.
And then I think I started taking writing seriously after I graduated college, and I was like, I think I could do this. I could probably, make a career out of it. And so I started working on a book series, and I kind of just fell in love with the process and like learning as much as I could about craft work and all of that. And I published my debut novel this year, so with the help of Jennia. And here I am.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So, I love the sound effects. So what was it? Can you tell me about at what point did you start thinking about working with a developmental editor? What were you hoping to get out of that relationship?
I think I really started to think a lot about it when I had my book die in the querying trenches. I kept getting like a lot of feedback from agents that would say, I love everything about it. It's just not a right fit for my list right now. And I just felt like it was very generic kind of feedback. And I was like, I need something more. And so when I started querying small presses, I realized that they worked with developmental editors, and one of my good friends worked with developmental editors, and she recommended Jennia.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great transition. Jennia, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into developmental editing?
Yeah, so it's a really roundabout way. My background is actually in psychology. I have a bachelor's in psychology with a minor in cultural anthropology. I have a master's in applied developmental psychology, which is a statistician. But every job that I've ever had required a lot of writing and editing, and I was always engaged with writing and editing on just a personal basis. So I was in the college level writing group when I was in high school. I wrote for the paper in high school and then in college. I did a lot of volunteer opportunities in addition to that, where I was still doing writing and editing. And then after working in stats for so long, I realized I really don't want to do this forever because it's kind of boring. So I started looking more into becoming an editor, looking at classes you could take, what craft books they recommend, and just took off from there. It started off very, very part-time, and now it's full-time.
So let's just get into the core of it. What is a developmental editor? Kind of big picture, what is it that you do?
Exactly, it's big picture. So it is looking at all those big picture pieces. We're looking at plot. Are there plot holes? Are there inconsistencies? The characters and their character arcs, how the characters behave. Can we understand why they're acting the way they're acting? If you're looking at something like fantasy or sci-fi, any really kind of speculative fiction or even historical fiction, looking at your setting, does your setting come across well, or are you dragging the reader down with details? Are you not adding enough details? Are there inconsistencies there? And then we have additional components in fantasy, like the magic system, for instance. So the magic system is another thing where it all needs to follow this line of logic and everything has to make sense. It can't be, I conveniently did this because the plot needed it. There has to be a reason, and the reader has to understand what that reason is.
I read a lot of fantasy, which means I also read a lot of bad fantasy. And I have this rule where I'll read the first page and I'll just sort of judge it based on how many made up words are on the first page. And it's like, I can handle a few, great, give me this world. But when they start racking up, I'm just like, all right, this is too much to track. You haven't set up any character. You haven't set up anything else. You're just throwing your world building at me. So
yeah, exactly. And that's another thing too that we look at, those opening scenes, that opening chapter. And I've read from agents anywhere from the first 8 words to the first 3 pages will be their deciding factor on whether or not they're going to acquire it. And so then you have to take from that that's probably similar for your reader, because they know what they like, they know what they don't like. a lot of them are not going to continue reading this book if it's not grabbing them instantly.
So you mentioned different genres. Would you say you work mostly in what would be called genre fiction? Do you have a specialty?
For the most part, yeah. So somehow I just fell into fantasy. I just kept getting more and more and more of it, and I continue to get more and more of it. But I also do a lot of picture books. So they're two very different things, but the one allows me to use my background in psychology and still touch on that and keep up to date with it, and then use that information for helping that book land with the child audience. And then fantasy is just like that personal fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love, I don't know. Came from I was raised in a Christian household when I was a kid. And so there's a lot of Bible stories and stuff. And I always felt like that was sort of the start for me in loving fantasy, where like, I just like loved these stories and like, I wanted more of them in different contexts and everything. And so fantasy, started with like Narnia and then Tolkien and then branching out. That's sort of like a very probably typical path for my age range. I've got a question here, which I think actually is apropos of what you're saying. Are there books, resources, or courses you would suggest for someone who wants to get into professional editing?
Yeah, so the EFA has a lot of really affordable courses that you can do. And then Jennifer Lawler through Club Ed also does a ton of editing classes. And then you can choose either self-paced or instructor-led. Everything I've taken from both of them, I've been glad that I made the investment. So that's where I would suggest starting.
Awesome. Now you mentioned your psychology degree, Lara. Are we getting some like writer therapy in this editing process as well, or how does that play in?
Listen, I'm pretty sure I messaged Jennia like literally a month ago, and I was like, I need my emotional support editor. And I'm probably in her DMs at least once a week having a meltdown. So yes.
I mean, it's so great to have that sort of, I like emotional support editor. I think that means you can bring her on the planes with you.
Yes.
Hey, free trips. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important to have those people in your life. Because, writing is so personal. You're putting yourself on the page, and, you can find different people, support writing groups or reps or whatever it is to have that. But let's get into the process itself. So at what point in the writing process, specifically, and it may vary, but Lara, did you already have a full manuscript that you sent to Jennia kind of at the beginning, or how did it start?
So with my debut, A Realm of Ash and Shadow, it was like a completed manuscript that I sent to Jennia, and we worked on that together. I think there was like 3 rounds of edits, and then a lot of back and forth and like messages. Like, I'm like, is this hitting right? Like, is this what you were picturing? Because I feel like I needed a very handheld approach to editing for my first go. But now with this other novel that I'm working on, it has been from like conception. I'm just like, I need help. Like, what do you think about this? And I just definitely, I'm back to the hand holding.
Jennia, is that typical? Is that a variety? Do you come in different stages or developmental editors in general, or is there a usual starting point?
So at the developmental editor, there will always be, or almost always, there will be a full manuscript already done. So when we go back further to the writing process, plotting, figuring those details out, that's really more book coaching. I don't always do that, but I do with some people. And that's partially just a preference as well. But it also has to do with being familiar with that person and knowing what they're like and their voice, and then helping them sort of weigh whether or not this is really them who's choosing this, or if because they think someone else thinks they should choose it. Because it does come across, and I'm not just saying this for the person who's present. I've seen this a lot where people are saying, well, but I've heard that readers don't really like characters who are like this, but this is what I'm really, really drawn to doing. Well, if that's what you're really, really drawn to doing, then do that. Because you're not going to be happy at the end of it if you are bending to whatever you think this invisible audience desires. Yeah.
So in this specific case, you get, in general, you get a manuscript from a writer. Before you read it, is there a conversation where the writer is sort of saying what they're looking for, or you're, laying out the scope of the relationship, or how do you move forward after that?
Yeah. So a lot of editors will have what are called onboarding questions. And so I will ask this series of questions. One of them is, how do you hope to publish this? because that's going to make a difference, not just in the marketability, but even if it's a series or not, since you might not be as likely to get picked up if you have, like this is book 1 of 5, just because they don't know yet how marketable that one book is compared to whatever else is already on their roster. I ask them, do you have any perceived strengths or weaknesses? Have you had anyone else read this? And I don't just mean like your best friend or your mom or something, but have you had beta readers? What sort of feedback have you gotten from that? And how do you feel about that feedback? And then I also do a sample just so they can see if this is really what they're looking for. But especially if it's a newer author and they might not know the differences between the types of editing, which is really common. I mean, it's really common just in general because editors sometimes define them different ways as well. I let them know exactly what we're going to be doing, what this covers, as well as what it doesn't cover. And then sometimes if they have further questions, we also have a quick phone call.
Lara, what was that process like for you filling out that the questionnaire?
I honestly don't even remember. I'm gonna be real with you. This year has been such a blur. I just feel like I just yeeted it to Jennia like I do everything. I'm just like, just take it. I don't care what you do, just make it better. And I think I just operate that way because I'm very open to criticism and like critiquing and like just I want it to be like the best possible version that it can be. So whatever Jennia says goes for me. I'm just like, okay.
Would you say that, she mentioned like perceived strengths and weaknesses or what you're looking for. Do you see yourself as a writer that there are certain things that are like, oh yeah, I got this handled, but this other aspect that's not, I might need more support?
Yeah, I think I have strengths when it comes to descriptions and like setting and kind of character voice, but I feel like sometimes I struggle with deeper point of view. And so I'm always like, can you keep an eye out for this? I don't really know if this is hitting emotionally the way that it should. And like deepening those relationships and making sure that each character feels like an actual person and not just a cardboard cutout. That's usually what I'm always kind of hoping to ensure is coming across correctly.
Cool. So Jennia, when you get the manuscript, what's that process like? What's your first read through it like? What are you looking for?
The very first time, I really am just reading it. And like if I'm opening it in Word, I will not enable editing because I don't want to be tempted to start picking at it. I really want to just read it as a reader would see it, because that better helps me see those big picture elements pop out than if I immediately start focusing on one section or making this minimalized version of it, where I'm looking at one chapter or one paragraph. I really want to see it as a whole first and be able to pick out things and think, what, was chapter 3 even necessary? This scene here, what was the point of it? Where was the motive for this scene? The character isn't acting like themselves here, but we don't know why. It helps me better see those things. So then I go through it again, and that's when I first start doing edits. But now I have all that other stuff in the back of my head going, which better helps me go through and pinpoint where those are happening, where we can move those items if they need to be moved, or how we can strengthen them or rewrite them if we need to.
Do you ever have, because I imagine when you're getting this manuscript, it can be in various, stages of completion or levels of quality. You may have something that's pretty well developed and needs more massaging, and you may have things that are like, all right, we got to like start chopping and really getting into it. Is there a sense where sometimes it needs, more work before you can really get in and start making the fine-tuned changes?
That's very rare just for the manuscripts that I've encountered. And usually in those cases, and again, that's why seeing a sample can help, not just so the author can see what your work is like, but you can get a sense of their work and what you think they need and give them a review of services that you think would most benefit them. So in those cases, I will come back and I'll say, before we begin editing, I would really encourage you to look into, A, B, or C. Maybe I think that they would benefit from some book coaching, and we can go through certain areas that maybe are not as strong as they could be. So these can be reworked before we jump into editing. or maybe I think that they need some beta reader feedback first, but that would be more in the case of perhaps they're not willing to listen to feedback just because they haven't heard that yet. So maybe they think that my recommendations are just a personal opinion that I'm giving them and not so much a viewpoint that readers might have. So it differs depending on the person. But it is very, very rare for me to get a manuscript that needs anything like that before we go into editing.
Lara, are you using beta readers? Do you have a network of trusted people that you turn to for feedback?
Yes, for my debut around Fashion Shadow, I had a bunch of beta readers, but for this second book, it's not in the same universe, so it's a little more close to my heart, and so I'm being a little more selective with who I'm letting read it, but I do have a handful of people who will be reading it. But I'm trying a different process this time where I'm doing the first draft and revising it, and then I'm sending it to Jennia. And then after I do my first round of edits, I'll be passing it along to betas to get their feedback before I send it back to Jennia. So I'm just kind of trying a new system to see if that kind of works better for me.
Nice. Jennia, do you have a network of betas that you turn to, or do you sort of rely on the author's own?
I rely on the author just because that is so personal. And I think a lot of it too, we go back to that vulnerability with our writing. You probably don't want to send an early draft out to 10 random people that your editor knows, but you've never encountered. Yeah. So I could see there being a lot of pushback there too. But yeah, again, a lot of it is just also people you can trust, because you want to make sure that your early work isn't going to be shared in some way or posted on the internet somewhere that you don't want it posted on before you're ready to have that done. So it's just not something I would feel comfortable with. But I have sent out information on how to find beta readers or groups where you can sign up for a beta reader depending on your genre. But that's almost at your own risk sort of thing, because again, you don't have that personal relationship with those people.
So you mentioned trust, which I think is something that's got to be at the core of the developmental editor writer relationship. How does that develop? Is it, organic, or are there specific strategies or things that you do in order to try to build that trust and, have that strong relationship?
Again, I think a lot of it just depends on the author too. There are certain authors where you can immediately feel that you have that mutual respect for each other, and that alone helps build trust a lot. However, in my contract, I try and set the stage for that by saying, none of this is going to be shared. This is completely confidential. Your work is your work. I'm not here to alter it to fit my vision of the story. I'm not here to change your voice. And I think for writers, that does mean a lot. And it helps to know that from the beginning that none of those things are going to be altered.
Lara, how did you feel in terms of that relationship? Was it once you started getting feedback and then you could, or like how did it develop in terms of like, oh, this is someone who I can trust and who I can rely on?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was reading through Jennia's first round of comments and stuff, and just seeing how kind and like compassionate she was in her feedback. And there was never any moments where she was like belittling me for doing something wrong or like phrasing something weird or word echoes or anything. She was just very chill and like kind. And I just really appreciated that, because I feel like we don't say it often, but authors, they're very sensitive to their work. And yes, like we are okay with criticism, but we wouldn't want it to be in a way that's kind of like, rude as shit. And so I just really appreciated Jennia for that. And then just the fact that I could message her randomly at all hours and she would just get back to me when she could and never, be like, why are you bugging me? Get the hell out of my inbox. I just really appreciated that. And then I realized that we had a lot of common interests. And that's when I was just like, okay, I think we could vibe. And that's just kind of how it just blossomed.
That's cool.
And now we do. Now we're also friends. So there is that.
Yeah, we got another question here from Ty. In media, which is on this subject, I see depictions of author and editor as friends, sometimes frenemies, who have a close personal relationship. You spoke on that a little bit, but would you say that's an accurate depiction, or is it very much, because this is also a professional relationship, right? Lara, you've hired Jennia to do this, so Jennia, what is the range of that? Or do you have some where it's just like business, like client, or a business relationship, and others where it develops, into something kind of more like friendship?
I would say the majority are just business relationships and they stay that way, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But just like writing can be a very solo activity, editing is very much the same way. So it's not as if I go out and meet people every day and coworkers to hang out with and that sort of thing. And every once in a while, there will be an author that I just really bond with and we connect on a level beyond just that writer-editor relationship. We've gone out and done things together. I've gone to events and supported her. She supported me when I've done things. So it really is just more than that for us. No, it's not like that all the time. And I have heard about the frenemy thing too. But again, I think that becomes from a mismatch. And I don't just mean a mismatch in what you thought you were going to get out of the editing experience, but sometimes that can be the personality or even just how the comments are given to the author, how they're phrased, their communication style might not match with yours. And that can lead to some sort of disconnect too. So they're all possible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great question, Ty. And for everyone else, please, if you have questions, drop them in, and we'll reference them as we go. I want to get back to the actual writing process itself. All right, so Jennia, you've done your first pass. You've seen the big picture. Now you're kind of going into a second time. What is that like?
It's a lot more nitpicky. So now we are going line by line, and I do usually combine stylistic or line editing with my developmental editing when I go into the second round, and I usually label that as substantive editing. So I really am going to be going line by line over word choice, how something is phrased. Is it impacting the flow of this sentence? Is it impacting the pacing of this paragraph? Does this sound like something this character would say? Would this character even use this word? And that's especially important like for historical fiction, or if you have characters who are different ages or come from widely different backgrounds, they're not going to have the same style of speech. And I want to make sure that that comes across. Because ideally, we want to be able to tell who the character is who's speaking without even needing that dialogue tag. So this is something that I will focus on here too.
Yeah, that's funny. I primarily work in screenwriting, and there's a thing where in your script you can go and basically black out all the character names and just read through it, and you should be able to tell who's speaking just by how they're speaking and what their word choice and everything is. So I like that. But as another thing I feel is if I'm giving notes from someone, like say I'm getting an email notes or something like that, when I first get it, it's like such an emotional, it's like, okay, here we go. I'm getting the feedback right now. And it's almost fraught where like I'll open the email and then like read the first sentence and then just like walk away, because it's like, it's such an it's not like, I'm not in my writer brain yet. I'm in like my like vulnerable human brain. And then it's like, okay, all right, we're good. Let's go. Let's get into it. So Lara, all of this is to say, when you're getting this first, it seems like a big batch of notes, covering a novel, which is, fundamentally large, a long piece of writing. What is that like for you when you're first processing the feedback?
Well, like I said, I've only done it once, but that first time it was really exhilarating. I think I remember I was like on the couch and the email came through, and I think it was like really late night. It was like 10 o'clock, and I was like, "What is she doing?" And my husband was sitting next to me, and I was like, "Jenny, just sent through the edit letter," and he was like, "Oh God, what did she say?" And I'm like, "Wait, why did she say, oh God?" Like I wasn't thinking, "Oh God." And then like I was reading it, and while there was like a lot of overarching things that she like suggested that I fixed, there was so much that she was gushing over that I was like, oh my God, it just kind of like renewed my faith in myself. Like, oh my God, I actually wrote something that's decent, that's going to be good, that people are going to love. Because if my editor liked it this much, then obviously complete strangers are going to as well. And so I think for me, it's really, I also like checking things off. So like when I got that long ass list, I was like, let's go.
Just dive into it.
Yeah.
Jennia, that I imagine the the balance between criticism and praise is important. I know, like, in workshops of knowledge, we always learned about the compliment sandwich.
Yes.
You're like, I really love this, blah, blah, blah. You may want to work on this, and I really love this other thing.
Right.
So, not to say that the praise is disingenuous, but are you conscious of making sure that you are highlighting these things to, bolster up the writer, as well as providing the
Definitely, because it's not my goal to just like rip their soul into pieces and never want to write again. Because you can always find something. And there really is always something. And I gave a presentation earlier this year at an editing conference. And I said, sort of like, if someone says, "Is my baby cute?" and you don't agree, there's still going to be something positive about the baby. Maybe he has a really happy smile. Maybe he has brilliant blue eyes. There's still going to be something good about that baby that you can comment on. It's the same way with a manuscript, because I use the analogy because manuscripts are like they're babies. And you want to go in and shred somebody's baby apart and tell how awful it is.
That's right. I generally just remain silent and make a comment on the baby's appearance, which I may
no comment might come across worse than
if I'm going to share a horrible story right now, but when I went to nieces and nephews, and when one of them was born, that particular one wasn't cute as baby, and I didn't make a single comment on their appearance for the first year of their life. And then around the 1 year mark, they get really cute. And I told my sibling that, which I thought showed restraint on my part. My sibling did not appreciate it in any way. I'm saying, like, now, right? That's just a little view of my twist of psychology. So, Larry, you mentioned the checklist thing. Yeah. When you do this, did you start with the small things? Did you try to go big? Did you have to like warm up to the big thing, or how did you kind of get into it?
So first I would go through, and I joke about it now, but like I would read all of the like little comment suggestions just to see if I was doing wrong, so I wouldn't do that again in future manuscripts. So if there was something over and over again that she was fixing, I just committed it to memory, and I will never get that offense again. And I don't even remember what it was now, but I just no. But then I would go through, and I joke about it because another one of my writer friends uses Jennia as an editor, and we're always like, just accept all track changes, just accept all, like, we're done here. But then I'll go through and I'll do big picture thing, and usually I start at the beginning and start combing through like the edit letter. Okay, this is like the biggest thing. How can I fix this in the book first? And then I backtrack and see. And usually, if I'm not really sure if I'm hitting what Jennia was expecting, I'll just send her a screenshot of like what I'm working on, and like, is this kind of what you were envisioning? Am I making this stronger? Am I making it worse? And I know, like, we worked really hard on my opening pages because I am notoriously just ass at opening chapters, and that was like a hurdle, but we got through it.
Yes, we survived.
Is feedback written, or are you having conversations verbally or Zoom or phone or anything?
We do all of the above. So normally my feedback will just be written. I'll have all the comments in the actual document, and it's normal for me to have thousands and thousands of comments within the document. And then I also write an editorial summary, and that letter is usually between 3 to 7 pages. And I try very hard not to make it too long because I know it can be overwhelming. And I've heard from other authors before that they got, say, like a 20-page letter, and they were just like, oh, forget it. This is too much. I'm not going to be able to do this. They obviously hated everything, and then they don't even read it. And I don't want that to happen to anyone who works with me. But yeah, so Lara and I do all of the above. We will have conversations in person. We will quickly jump onto Facebook and have a messenger meeting with audio back and forth. I've done stuff on Instagram over in the DMs over there where we're going back and forth and sending pictures, or again, using the audio. We've talked on the phone. I mean, it's everything.
You're like fully encapsulating all of modern communication there.
We'll have like 3 separate conversations going on.
Right. Yes. Jumping back and forth between social media platforms. Oh, there's a message over here too.
Yeah. And it's funny because like we've gone to a couple concerts together, and I swear every concert I'm like, so I had this new idea for book 2, and I just really got to run it by you real quick because it's all I can think about.
Standing in line at the merch table and we're talking about plotting, and it probably sounds terrible because it's usually about killing somebody.
Yeah, I'm like, I think he has to die. Like, there's no other way.
Right, which sounds totally normal.
I like to think you also have like messenger pigeons just like passing in the air too, just anywhere you can, or like a telegraph being
whole flock of them.
Yes.
It's interesting. I find like that they're between like written notes and verbal notes. It's like it's not just the form of communication is different, but I feel like you also can get through different ideas. Like I've been in a lot of writers groups and writers rooms and things like that. And I've always found personally, if I'm giving someone feedback and it's written, I'll think of some things, but then once I start having a conversation about it is when the ideas really start to flow back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exactly that. It is the back and forth, because they're bringing up things that you haven't thought about. And so it, pops those new ideas out so that you can have that conversation.
I think it's really interesting to think about books and writing in general, and the fact that like, in the span of human existence, writing and mass literacy has only existed for the blink of an eye, and that we are verbal creatures. We speak, we tell stories verbally. And so I think sometimes, having that conversation can really like tap into a way that our brains evolved in how we think about stories. And so, that can be really important. Ty was saying, balancing criticism and praise is something I struggle with. My teachers used to say that I should point out 3 good things for every one thing that needs fixing. I think that's not a horrible approach in order to keep positive. All right, so Lara, you've got the big feedback. You're making your changes. It's going back and forth, and then I assume Jennia, also it can vary whether that's it or there's a second draft coming or a third draft, or how does it move forward after that point?
So I always do 2 rounds, which means I see it twice. And sometimes there is a need for a third round. Like the 2 of us did a third round on her first book because we added so much. I mean, like a whole new part of the plot that was added in during the second round. And so then again, just to make sure that everything's consistent and that it's gone through the way we both envisioned it going through, that can make a third round necessary. If there aren't a lot of changes within the second round, or there aren't these overarching structural issues or developmental issues that we're still trying to nail down, it's not really necessary.
Lara, were there notes or suggestions that you disagreed with? And if so, how did you kind of handle talking about those?
I'm trying to think. I think the first thing that came to my mind was like the random message from Jennia where she suggested that I change some characters' names because too many of the characters' names were coming across based in like Christian origin. And in my book, there's 4 different realms, and one is supposed to mirror like heaven, but I wanted it to be kind of vague, so it could be any religion. But because of those names, they were coming across just too Christian focused. And at first I was like, I'm not changing these names. Like, these characters have been this character forever. Like, my main character's dad's name was Ephraim. And like, I loved it. I was like, he's so evil. It's perfect. But then I like sat with it and I was like, God, she's right though. And I ended up changing them. But yeah, there's like just little things that you don't really expect. Like, I never would have thought of that on my own. I never would have been like, oh yeah, they're way too Christian. But of course Jennia did.
Of course.
Jennia, we got another question here. Have you ever read something on a first pass that you disliked, but once the author explains it, you liked it more? Have you changed your mind? I mean, yeah, I think, and then the second part, has an author ever changed your mind? I think, Lara, you were saying that you did change your mind, but Jennia, does it take you a while sometimes to see what the author is trying to do?
Well, part of this question is I try not to think about whether I personally like it or dislike it, because it's not really about me and my preferences. So it isn't something I really tend to focus on or think about. I'm thinking more of that broader general audience and who their target audience is. So there might be a trope that I'm not crazy about, but I know it's a popular trope. And so I'm going to be looking at how that audience is going to respond to it, not how I personally would respond to it. And then with the second one, if it has to be explained, that means it's probably going to have to be explained to the reader as well. So there is going to need to be something there so that the reader sees what you're getting at, not necessarily so your editor understands what you're getting at.
How much pushback will you give if you have a note that you think is pretty important and the author is not getting it or having an emotional reaction, or just, will you let it lie, or will you be like, hey, you really need to take another look at this aspect?
Well, again, I go back to the reader. And so one of the things I enjoy doing is going through Goodreads or Bookstagram and Book Talk and reading people's reviews, because it gives you a really good idea of what people like and what they don't like. And so even those things where people will say like, what are your top 5 hated phrases in such and such kind of genre? And people are always happy to give their answers to those kinds of questions. So then it's easy to take that information and just say, your reader audience might not connect with this because of this. And so I try to always phrase it around the reader and what their expectations might be, what their response might be. Because generally most of the people I've worked with, they do want their book to be a success. They do want to be well reviewed, but that means you have to please your reader. And so that's why I always use the reader as my basis for why I'm saying this. And it's not just me saying I'm using the reader as my basis. It's an informed decision or informed information that I'm then passing on and sharing with them. So again, it's not really about me personally. If there's, I don't think such and such character should have died, just because I personally wish they wouldn't die because I connected with them. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. I don't say anything about, I really think you should keep this person alive because I say so. If I know, for instance, that this character is really, really well loved by the reader audience, then I might say something, because you can anticipate that you're going to have a lot of pushback from your reader base.
Lara, I'm curious, in your writing, how much are you thinking about the reader versus yourself and what you want to express?
Well, with my debut, I was not thinking about the reader at all. It was a guilty pleasure book. I was like, I'm writing what I like, what I want to read, and that's how it's going to go. And that ended up being a very unlikable main character to some readers. Like, I feel like my debut is very polarizing. People either really love it and they're shipping it and they're talking about getting tattoos, or they despise it with like the intensity of 1,000 Suns. And honestly, I don't know if I would rather have it any other way, because I think I did it right.
Well, and you sold out in an hour and a half at a major event. So I think that you're doing just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it always feels like, it's better to have a passionate responses than a bunch of lukewarm ones.
Yeah.
Like, it's not very sustainable in some sense. You're
Exactly.
going to find your fans, your audience. So you can't please everyone,
Right.
You do need to write, especially as a writer, just like motivation to write more. If you're not writing what pleases you, then like it becomes a different kind of job. I feel like in some ways it becomes more like manufacturing something than it does a labor of love and art. So we have a little time left. I wanted to talk, you were saying now it's a different process a little bit for your follow-ups here. Is that sort of the difference between developmental editor and writer coach, or how do you kind of describe this relationship?
Yeah, so a book coach comes in early on, and they will be there during that sort of the genesis of the idea. You're figuring out the plot, you're figuring out the characters. You might have something written, you might have nothing written. I've come in with both different circumstances with those. So we sort of walk you through it. Okay, so what is your vision for this book? How can we achieve that vision? Where are you at now? And we'll usually take one section at a time or one element at a time and work through it. So maybe we have a character and they're not really fleshed out yet. We don't know their GMC. We don't understand what their motive is in these scenes we plan on putting them in. So then we're going to work through all of those things and make sure that those are ready before we really begin writing. And then developmental editing, all of that is already done, or at least most of it is already done. The manuscript is already written, and we're looking at the actual manuscript. We're not helping you take the information we're providing so that you can write the manuscript.
Now, how does it feel to be writing about, I mean, like you said, the first one was a very personal, just sort of like you writing this thing on your own, how do the processes feel different and better or worse?
I feel like I have more support in the sense of if something's not working, I have like a reliable source where I can be like, look, I really don't think this is working. Can you keep an eye out for it? I really want to make sure it hits. And also it's kind of nice because like to be close friends with my editor, because I can be like, hey, when is the last day I can get you this without you, like dying from too much work? And it's always like, oh, this date. And I'm like, please, no. And so there's,
Yeah.
it's nice, I think. And I definitely feel more capable knowing I have that support system.
That's awesome. Now that we've covered all like the friendship happy stuff, let's get into the business, the money here, because I think that's an important thing. How does it work, Jennia? I mean, because again, these are your clients, they're paying for your services. Is it flat fees? Does it depend on the type of service, but how does the financial side of it work?
So I usually use a flat fee. I think it's just easier because sometimes I know people will do per word, but then what if you have this rate in mind and as you're finishing it, you've added 10,000 words? Well, then you might be going back and forth about like, can I really still afford it or not? And then there's also the amount of hours involved, because some manuscripts are obviously going to take less time than other manuscripts. And that's not just because of the quality or the strength of the writing, but it's also the material. So for instance, I did a memoir that was about a traumatic event that happened locally. And although that was a shorter book, just emotionally, it was a lot harder to go through. And I had to stop frequently and take breaks from it. That's not so much the case with, say, a contemporary romance. It's emotionally light. It's pretty fluffy a lot of the time. You can go through it a lot faster. You aren't going to have to take breaks because you just can't handle it anymore at that given moment. And then also it depends on the story itself and the plot. If it's extremely complicated and you have various subplots that are running throughout it and then coming together, that's going to take more time. If it's epic fantasy or a sci-fi novel that is using an entirely new world they've created, that's going to take more time because now you're tracking all those world building elements as well. So all that goes into me deciding what the rate will be.
Cool. A few minutes left. So if anyone please has any more questions, drop them into the chat now or forever hold your peace. And I think we can just kind of end with, what do you see as a success, Jennia, when you're doing this editing process? How do you kind of judge whether, I don't know, you did your duty as a developmental editor?
If the author is pleased.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Cool. No, that's a great answer. Yeah, Lara, is there anything else you want to talk about? You want to mention about the process or working with Jennia?
I was trying to think about, like, because you wanted to talk about like the money aspect, and I think for me, there's like, it doesn't really feel like I'm paying her, but it doesn't feel like she's working for me because it does feel like that collaboration. So like, even though obviously she deserves to be paid fairly by everyone, I think that we're friends first, and I would never want to like dick her over or take advantage of her, and I wouldn't want to see anybody else do that. So yeah, that's what I just want to put out there. Like, business, yeah, but we're friends first, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's such a interesting, because like, with art, there's so many different layers to it, right? It is, people are trying to make a living off of it, and that's kind of the goal for so many writers to be able to do it. But it is an artistic process. It's a personal process. You have like all of these things wrapped together into it, which is, I think, one of the things that makes it so fascinating. But I want to thank you both so much for joining us. I think this was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I hope our viewers enjoyed it and learned a little about this process and maybe got some things to consider if they're thinking about working with a developmental editor. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights and opening up about your experience working with each other.
Yeah,
it's really awesome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I love the applause. Yes.
Thank you.
On the soundboards like the morning drive-in radio show DJ. But great. And I think that's going to be the end for us, Rob. I don't know if you want to hop back on and say goodbye. But yeah, that is our end of our show. All right, everyone. Have a great week and happy writing. Bye, Rob.
See ya.